Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, we're on the road. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is where we call home for the next few days, as I decided to hit the road after I got some work done yesterday and come help and do whatever I can, at least, in the retail politics reign for my congressional candidate friend, Mal Hyman. He's running for South Carolina's 7th Congressional District. His incumbent, Russell Fry, is obviously not just a Republican, but he is a MAGA Republican, replacing a Republican who had the audacity, the temerity, to vote for Donald Trump's impeachment after January 6th. Well, that made that gentleman, Tom Rice, persona non grata to more than enough Republicans that they implanted someone else who had very little legislative history or experience into Washington, and now he is an incumbent Republican who we'll try to unseat. Here we are staying in the home of some friends of ours, and literally just weaving in and out of getting showers and going to speaking events, and an impromptu studio upstairs in the loft area as well. So this may not sound as polished as it normally does, and I apologize for that, but we'll make it work. We're also going to give you a little bit of a treat. We have a musical guest. How about that? Music. We have a musical guest. First things first, though, I want to get to the Georgia State Supreme Court and their actions yesterday. Who better to give us the news than Mark Elias from Democracy Docket? Yes, that Mark Elias.
Breaking news. The Georgia Supreme Court unanimously rejects the RNC's request to reinstate the MAGA election denier rules that could have delayed certification. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Mark Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started. Mark, major decision from the Georgia Supreme Court. Break down for us what they just ruled and what the impacts are.
All right. So the Georgia Supreme Court just denied a Republican Party motion to expedite review of an appeal of a case they lost to the trial court. That case that they lost was brought by a group that struck down 7 rules that this MAGA-dominated state election board enacted. And these rules ranged from things that would have allowed the delay or mischief with certification, to a hand counting rule, to rules that would have expanded the area around poll watching, to requiring videotaping and video surveillance of drop boxes. This is a major defeat for Donald Trump's effort to subvert the election results in the state of Georgia.
And what's ironic here is that there were Republicans who were fighting the state election board along the way as well. In fact, reading from Mark Nisi's article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a Republican who sued the state election board, former state representative Scott Turner, said the board exceeded its authority by changing election procedures. They tried to be a legislative body when they're not. I'm excited for election workers, he says, who have been expressing relief that they won't have to implement these 11th hour rules changes. The point of the lawsuit has always been to restore the separation of powers and to make sure the legislature has supremacy over election law and to make sure unelected appointees were not making new law. Now, this may mean when the General Assembly goes into a session next January that they may take up some of these provisos, some of these provisions, and try to implement them into new law, but that'll happen long after November 5th, 2024. Back to Democracy Docket and the conversation with Mark Elias, along with Paige Moskowitz.
Mark, there were 2 rules that caused a lot of concern, not just in Georgia, but nationwide. One of them was the quote unquote reasonable inquiry rule that said that local election officials could conduct a reasonable inquiry into the completeness and accuracy of the election before they certified results. And as you mentioned, the hand count rule that said that poll workers across Georgia needed to hand count every ballot cast on election day. Now, they weren't hand counting for race results. They just needed to count the total number of ballots cast on election day. But taken together, those 2 rules had the possibility of delaying results and delaying certification.
A recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and also, look, even if it didn't delay anything, like, why are you burdening these election officials? Why are you making people who have just worked the entire day and are going to be working well into the evening to ensure that Georgia is able to report its election results? Why are you going to force every one of them at every precinct in the state to hand count a bunch of pieces of paper?
Yep.
Like what's about that? What's that about, right? Other than creating and sowing the idea of chaos. Why would you say that these county election officials, these canvassing boards, whose job is ministerial? What do I mean by that? Its job is to take the numbers, put them on the state-approved form, sign them, and send them on.
Yep.
Why would you create rules to create the illusion that somehow they are to do their own investigation and create, again, an atmosphere, an aura of somehow something may be amiss? Right? The only reason why the Republicans wanted these rules, the only reason why Donald Trump called these people out by name is because they want to spread lies. They want to sow misinformation.
I mean, we saw what Marjorie Taylor Greene did just with I heard a story about a vote getting flipped in Whitfield County, which is in her congressional district. It turned out not to be the case, and it wasn't all of his choices on the ballot. She literally went on Alex Jones earlier this week and whipped this narrative together.
Someone posted up that when they went to vote in Whitfield County here in Georgia's 14th district, now remember, we're a swing state and we need everyone to vote in my district. And so they went to vote, and we have the Dominion machines. And you go through and you mark president, you mark, for Congress, that would be me. They marked Donald Trump, and they marked who they were voting for the rest of the way down their ballot on the machine. Then when they're finished, the machine prints their ballot, a paper copy, a printed copy, and each voter has to review that printed copy to make sure that it has selected the candidates that they want to vote for. And so when this voter printed their ballot and they looked, it had changed. It was not Donald Trump. It was not me. And it was not the other ones they had voted for.
Wrong.
It had switched.
Wrong.
And so they went up to one of the election workers and they said, here's the problem. The machine switched it, and printed ballot.
Wrong.
I did not vote for these people.
Wrong.
So they had to start over, and they went through it several times, and it kept on making the same error, kept on switching the votes.
Wrong.
And so
Wrong.
This is something we're just starting to look into today, because I just found out about it this morning before I came on your show today. But we will be following up, and I'll be talking to election workers and officials here in the district and making sure that this happens, that these ballots are correct, because that's extremely concerning. It sounds similar to what we heard in 2020.
Things that we all learned were utter bullshit, but what happened in Whitfield County actually was that the voter noticed that one of the 3 constitutional questions on the ballot had changed, and he brought it to the attention of someone at the polling location who said, let's look at this. All right, we're going to trash this ballot, do it again. And that voter came away satisfied with the result. Boom, problem solved. Yeah, Mark Elias is right. Misinformation generators just need to have a little bit of fodder, and the state Supreme Court in Georgia put a stop to that.
Look, Paige, what they did with the hurricane. Look at how much damage they did by lying about FEMA and the relief efforts. These are shameless people who will weaponize every aspect of our democracy. Every aspect of everything that holds us together as a people, they will weaponize to tear us apart. And so that's why it's important that those were struck down. And it's the reason why it is great to see that the state Supreme Court is not giving any quarter to these efforts.
And listen, these are not liberal activist, lunatic activist judges. This is the conservative Georgia State Supreme Court. From the American Civil Liberties Union of Georgia. Easy for me to say. With this ruling, the court keeps the status quo in place, refusing to allow the state election board to inject chaos and confusion into our democratic system. That from Andrew Young, executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Georgia. He continues, we are excited about the record early voting numbers in Georgia and glad that now all can focus on participating in this important election without disruption. Speaking of folks showing up to vote, let's go back to that website that I'm loving, georgiavotes.com. Again, this is just some random guy who put together a website and grabs the information each day from the Georgia Secretary of State's office and gives us a snapshot of what the early vote looks like so far. And so far, by the way, we're only 3% now. It was 9% over the weekend, down to 6%, I believe, when we no, I'm sorry. It was down to 9% behind the 2020 pace on Monday. 6% yesterday. We are now only 3% off the 2020 pace for early voting. So folks are showing up in record numbers. Right now, we are at 1,935,867 folks who have voted so far in the state of Georgia. Nearly 2 million voters have already gone to the polls and made their decision. And again, 3 percentage points off. We've talked a little bit about the gender disparity. 55.3% of those who have voted so far are female. By race, you're looking at 59.4% who are white. The African-American vote still trailing a little bit, 26.9%. Hispanic and Asian voters accounting for 2.4 and 2.3%. When you look at the age scenario, the overwhelming majority of those who have voted so far are aged 50 plus. Yeah. So, let's look at this. The non-voters, the folks who didn't vote in 2020 who are voting now, that's where you see a huge chunk coming in from the 18 to 29 demographic. They're at 51.8%. 51.8% of all new voters are under the age of 30. The overwhelming majority of those, by the way, are Hispanic or Asian American. 31.4% for Hispanic Americans and 28% for Asian Americans. The Asian American and Hispanic American Get Out the Vote campaign is working for the under 30 voter. All right, going to take a quick break, come back. I have a musical guest. I've never had a musical guest on this show. This is a first, and I'm pretty excited about it. As I drove in late last night, we hung out for a little bit, a group of us, and sang songs and chewed the fat and solved the world's problems. Being a little modest there. Anyway, so can't wait to introduce you to the first ever musical segment on The Ron Show. When we return here on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Of course, we'll have show notes at RonShowATL.com. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms. That's at RonShowATL. Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. We're all over it. So I mentioned to you that I've never had a musical guest on this show before. I mean, it's not what we do. But when we get the opportunity to, I say, why not? I'm a former radio DJ from back in the day, about 25 years of bouncing around the South. I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for the next few days. I call it one of my hometowns. I lived here 11 years. I think I get that distinction. So back here helping out with Congressional candidate Mal Hyman, who's running for Congress, as is his good friend, Randy Cahall. Randy, come on up to the mic here and give us a little bit of your background. I heard so many stories about you guys getting arrested and protesting and this, that. Tell me a little bit about yourself and then your association with Mal over the years and why you decided to come to Myrtle Beach to pitch in on the campaign trail.
Yeah, well, I'll start out by saying that I've known Mal for 45 years. He's been a great friend over the years. We met each other out in California doing some good political work around anti-nuclear and anti-nuclear power work and anti-nuclear weapons work. Mal's a dedicated guy. He's an ethical guy. He's a great guy. So I actually live in New Mexico, and I've been out there 36 years. I'm a registered nurse, but I'm also a folk musician, been playing music for many, many years. And I kind of focus on something called topical folk music mostly, which is got political tones to it, and it addresses issues out there. I do other stuff too as well, but I really like the topical. But I'm out here for 2 weeks to help Mal out. Very happy to be doing it. You know, Mal's not a guy that's taking a big PAC money. He's not taking huge contributions from people. He's very, staying with the individual contributions. Doesn't have a lot of money, so we're doing a real grassroots campaign, really getting out there and talking to people.
Which sort of dovetailed nicely with what we're going to let you illustrate here, and that is the movement music. There was a lot of movement music in the 60s and 70s, and relevant to what we're dealing with today, you've got some offerings for us, right?
I do. Yeah, I'd like to play a couple songs for you. Right. One is by a guy named Woody Guthrie.
I know that guy.
Yeah, and Woody is from the 30s, a huge anti-fascist on his guitar. He had printed "This Guitar Kills Fascist." That was prior to World War II.
Nice.
And he was a real man of the people, traveled around, really cared about people who needed and who were poor folks but needed help. And then the second song that I'm going to do is by a guy named Phil Oakes, who also wrote a lot of topical music, especially in the 60s, anti-war music, and some real great songs about compassion. I'm going to do one of those songs.
All right, let me get us set up, and then we'll get right to it. All right, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Randy Cahall.
Okay, this song is by Woody Guthrie. It's about freedom. It's about this land is your land. So, hope you enjoy it. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. Yeah, this land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. Yeah, this land was made for you and me. One bright Sunday morning, in the shadow of a steeple, by the relief office, I seen my people. As I stood there hungry, I stood there whistling, that this land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. Yeah, this land was made for you and me. So this last verse is about freedom, which is an issue that we're all thinking about these days. And I love this verse. Oh, there's no one who can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Oh, there's no one who can ever turn me back, 'cause this land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. Oh, this land was made for you and me. I said this land was made for you and me.
Randy Cahall giving us some Woody Guthrie. I'm reading a little bit about Woody and just what a contrarian he actually was. You know, a lot of folks, you know, we just intrinsically, because we're raised around it, enjoy songs like the Star Spangled Banner, unaware of some of the racist verbiage in subsequent verses. Even Irving Berlin's God Bless America. That song was a response of sorts to God Bless America and the self-absorption, the white nationalism, even, I guess, in some respects, that can come from the connotation of that song. And that was something of a response by Woody, who, again, was a bit of a contrarian and really thought beyond just the patriotism pumped into our system at a young age.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved singing that song in elementary school.
Yeah.
Yeah, we taught it in elementary school, so it's great.
We have about a minute and a half left, so we probably ought to take a break and let us catch up a little bit on some other things, and then when we come back, we'll get your second song in if that works for you.
Perfect.
We are waiting on Mal Hyman. Mal Hyman had to go downstairs, have some breakfast. I get it. I'm not a breakfast person personally, but folks got to have their fuel, their sustenance before they go talking on heady subjects. And we sat up, gosh, we were probably up until about midnight last night, just solving all the world's problems between Randy giving us song. So what do you think the most important thing we came away from our conversation last night was?
How about if you work hard? How about if you fight, you win?
Yeah, that is the theme. That is very much a theme on the right this time around. So we're in South Carolina, as I mentioned to start the show, doing our bit. Randy has been here and pledged his couple of weeks to come help out Mal Hyman, who is really doing not just the door-to-door, but the handshake-to-handshake retail politicking. Mal has 2 events today that he is participating in, and actually a third that I worked out or convinced him he needed to do. And I'm really excited about that one, too. He's going to go visit with some folks in the Latino community today. And you know what? I'm a gay man. Maybe I can get him to the gay bar. And we can see if we can get him to meet some of the LGBTQ population while we're here as well. Whatever it takes to flip a seat when you have such a razor-thin margin in the House of Representatives, and this is such an important election that if and God willing, Kamala Harris is elected president, she's going to need the Senate and the House to accomplish more of those stated goals. Anyway, we've got more music. We've got Mal Hyman, 7th Congressional District candidate here in South Carolina when the Ron Show returns on America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So we are in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I know what you're thinking. This is not a swing state. This is not. But every race, especially for a House seat, matters. And having lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for 11 years, I volunteered with Gloria Bromell-Tanubu. I volunteered, I think this is Mal's third, maybe fourth go here at the 7th Congressional District. And we know that you think South Carolina, there's no way you've got Democrats in South Carolina. There are actually a lot of Democrats in South Carolina. And you've got in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the uniqueness of having so many transplants from the Rust Belt. Some of those blue-collar union Democrats who have moved down here. In a lot of cases, we have the scenario where folks relocate and then they come down here and they like the low taxes. The limited government part they're not so crazy about, especially after a tropical storm or hurricane. But I digress. And then getting them to stay active in politics becomes a little bit of a problem. So it's one of those situations where you know you've got the ingredients in the pantry to make a really good meal. You just got to reach back deep into the pantry sometimes to get that ingredient that really makes it stand out. So we've believed for a long time here that the 7th Congressional District in particular is a district that can be a winnable district. I've been pleading with the Service Industry Union to come to Myrtle Beach to start planting those seeds. Myrtle Beach is a popular tourist destination. Tens of millions, like 15 to 20 million people come to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina every year to vacation. So when you think about how important the Service Industry Union is in Las Vegas, Nevada, for example. Nevada, a swing state, right? And how impactful the Service Industry Union is in Las Vegas. That can happen in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina as well. If we can just get folks like the SEIU to come in here and realize you have a ton of service industry working in South Carolina along the Grand Strand, along the coast, and it's an untapped resource. Huge untapped resource. One day, somebody will come in to the market and realize, wow, there's a lot of bells and whistles here if we could just crank this machine up. But I digress. I can go off on a rant on that. We'll have Mal Hyman on a little bit later in the show. Anyway, his friend, Randy Cahall, who we met just last segment, had been politicking and protesting along with Mal in the 1970s, fighting against nuclear proliferation. And you guys talked a little bit about, what was it last night? You talked about the nuclear facility that was being built on a fault line in California.
Diablo Canyon.
Yeah.
Central Coast there, California.
The craziness that is. Anyway, Randy has honed his craft not only as a nurse, but he wields a guitar. And I imagine you don't get to carry the guitar into the jail with you, but you did carry some folk tunes in there with you from time to time and get the ire of some of those police officers there as well.
Yes, we did. Yeah. I was arrested twice in Los Angeles for protesting at Honeywell, which was making nuclear triggers for nuclear weapons back in the early 80s. And I spent two fairly brief stints in L.A. County Jail. But at one point, the group that got arrested, we all were in a big holding cell, and we all started singing some, I would say, progressive songs. And we got a look from the guards like, that's enough. Stop that. So we stopped.
You know it's good for you, right? You said you had another song in the chamber for us. Which one's this?
Yeah, this is a song by a guy named Phil Oakes, and I would really urge people to get online and really look for this guy's music. He's incredible. He's no longer with us, but he wrote tons of songs, particularly anti-war songs in the 1960s. But he also wrote this beautiful song that I think has been covered by a lot of different artists. It's really about compassion, and I think we're losing a lot of our compassion, and I want to do this. It's called There But For Fortune.
And real quick, before you do that, if you go to look up Phil Oakes, it's Ochs.
Yes.
All right. Carry on.
From El Paso, Texas, actually.
All right.
Show me the prison. Show me the jail. Show me the prisoner whose face has grown pale, and I'll show you someone with so many reasons why. And there but for fortune may go you or I. Show me the alley. Show me the train. Show me the homeless who are sleeping in the rain, and I'll show you someone with so many reasons why. And there but for fortune may go you or I. Show me a country where the bombs had to fall. Show me the ruins of a buildings once so tall, and I'll show you a land with so many reasons why. And there but for fortune may go you or I, you and I, you and I, you and
I really dig that song. It's been covered by Peter, Paul, and Mary. It's been covered by Cher and Joan Baez. And what a message, right? It's one of those messages that, like, I feel like really resonates right now when we're dealing with folks in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton and the misfortune that has fallen on, folks who may not have ever thought that they would awaken to being flooded out. I mean, I think of Western North Carolina. There was a story, I believe, on NBC Nightly News, I want to say, a couple of nights ago. This woman who was a climate scientist, she and her husband literally moved from the coast to Western North Carolina because they wanted to go somewhere where they wouldn't experience the effects of climate change. So they went to Asheville, North Carolina, one of those safe spots. They list like Buffalo, New York, and Asheville, North Carolina, and some other internal cities in the continental U.S. that were I forget what the term was, but there were these safe spots from the effects of climate change, and Asheville, North Carolina was one of them. And I wondered a lot here in the last few weeks, do folks really actually connect the dots when they realize that a lot of the folks who are coming to our border are coming because of the effects of climate change themselves? Never mind the economic unrest, never mind military incursions, but yeah, climate change. Climate change has a lot to do with migration and immigration concerns, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. Yeah, so there, but for fortune. I think that's an appropriate pivot now. We have Mal Hyman joining us, who is running for the 7th Congressional District seat here in South Carolina. And let's pick up right at that conversation. There, but for fortune. We were talking about the effects of climate change and how the folks in Western North Carolina who never dreamed that they would be impacted by a hurricane, because when you move to Asheville, North Carolina, hurricanes aren't exactly on the top 10 list of concerns. But for fortune, they find themselves in the same sort of scenario that folks who have been fleeing other parts of the world for safer havens, and the reaction that comes from those who live in those safer havens and the pushback. Anyway, Mal, thanks for joining us.
Great to join you.
And thanks for introducing me and the show and the audience here to Randy, who blessed us with some musical gifts, not only last night when we arrived, but here on the show today. It's been a pleasure actually just kind of participating and doing whatever little bit that I can to help you when you call on me, and I'm grateful to know that we have people even running for office like you. We don't have enough folks running for office like you. We need 435, and unfortunately we got a case of the shorts. But you're doing the retail politics thing, and having Randy come into town, that's huge for you. Talk a little bit about just the cobbling together of trying to make this race work, and what our chances are pulling this off, you think?
Well, I'm really grateful for your support, for Randy's support. We're old friends. Did political organizing years ago in Riverside, California, and if I might, while teaching in a state prison, there's the there but for fortune moment that all teachers get to in prisons, and you realize there but for the grace of God go I, and everybody who teaches in a prison can bear witness to that, and you move into solidarity. And from that time in the mid-'70s, I did political organizing in Riverside, California. We pulled together 13 different organizations. We'd meet together once a month, shared lists, would run rallies, and once we got to about 1,000 people at a rally, people running for Congress or governor would join us. We realized there's power, and most change comes from the bottom up, not from the top down. When the people lead, the leaders will follow. They'll listen to you. And so I saw that as a model, met a fellow who was part of the Pentagon Papers while I was organizing, and he got me to graduate school. And graduate students talked to me about, you got to visit war zones in Central America to bear witness and be a good teacher, and they were completely right. And I learned how to listen better and try to bring people together better, and it's a lot of trial and error. I'm not very good at it, but you do the best you can, and you get better the longer you fight. And this fight, we're cobbling together what we can. There's no money from the national or state Democratic Party. I won't take a dime of corporate or banking money because you can't serve two masters. But there are a lot of people that are volunteering. And I think with Kamala Harris leading the ticket, we've seen the political winds blow much stronger in our direction. Part of the challenge is harnessing this. People aren't used to fighting in a political sense. They're more used to cheering and getting excited and maybe donating a little bit of money, and for a few people writing postcards. And we need people to go further into Canvas, to do the phone banking. And that's a little tougher to get people to do if they're unaccustomed to doing it. Frankly, I think as a society, we have so much wealth, we're amusing ourselves to death. And everything sacred is on the ballot this time. So when I started, I realized Biden was a good man but couldn't campaign anymore, painfully evident during the debate. And I stayed with it because there are a lot of things that need to be said, and we were going to plant the seeds the best we could. Whole different ball game with Harris leading the ticket, and it's that challenge of harnessing the political energy. And we're working at that every day, and it's trial and error with it. Of course, with a modest budget, you're changing your strategies and tactics constantly, sorting it out in the morning. What are you going to do? But it's good trouble. It's the good fight, and critical for democracy and for climate change.
So you talked a little bit about what does work or what doesn't work or what people are used to. I kept thinking last night, I'm listening to you guys tell stories and listening to folk songs, and I kept thinking, we're not used to that. We don't have that sort of activism anymore in this country. And the closest thing I think we came to it, we talked about the Women's March after Donald Trump was elected in 2016 and our reaction to that versus reacting before it happened and getting active and taking to the streets. We talked about like how there seems to be a need for a shift from showing up to a rally to hear the same stump speech versus hitting the streets and marching to show we're here, these are our issues, and we want you to take us seriously. Can you speak to that, the era of the 60s and the 70s and activism then versus the activism now?
It's a lot easier to teach a class than to do an interview. Because
you've got a student, you've got a class of one here, so
you move through all sorts of examples. I think the paradigm for social change is things get bad and then people pay a lot more attention, and that was certainly true with the civil rights movement, but the labor movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, the environmental movement, and I was reactive myself. I came of age in 1968, and romance and sports were central in high school, and then I looked at the protests and the race riots and political assassinations and the fact that I could be drafted to fight in the war in Vietnam, and I took my politics seriously because I had to. And as soon as I started to get involved, many things were revealed to me, and I realized that I was a bit tentative each level of fighting for change, even canvassing, as I tend to be a quiet person, and once you do it, you realize, well, this isn't much, and then you work on getting a rally together, and then you volunteer for a campaign, you see how that is run, and I thought, take the path of teaching, because it gave me a chance to talk at length about a lot of these issues, but I think people come to it at their own pace, and normally they're forced to, and I think with any country that has a fair amount of prosperity, people will avoid these questions if they can. And a lot of folks who face problems and are living paycheck to paycheck are mired in the day-to-day problems of life, fixing their car, paying the rent, keeping electricity bill paid, and they don't really have much time and energy to get involved in politics. So it takes a while to build a movement, and then you got to build a movement that's going to resonate with a wide enough audience to actually move the needle. Usually when political campaigns, particularly the national presidential campaigns, come along, we're able to see very polished and committed candidates, and it is inspiring to hear them. And we've heard in our lifetime some brilliant orators, but it's hard to build and sustain a movement. In South Carolina, it's particularly tough because the state has become redder and redder, and people fall into despair, and they're with us, but they're not used to organizing or fighting because it doesn't look like it can bring any results. Now it looks like it can bring some results, so more people are moving back into it. But, even some of the civil rights movement, if I can go on for just another moment, I mean, Martin Luther King realized that civil disobedience was hard to get people to commit to and train, but once they would do it, it would reveal how power viewed nonviolent, loving protest. And in the process, it could transform those who were looking in as political observers into recognizing how abusive power can be, and the nature of tyranny, and the need for them to follow the courage of their convictions.
Mal Hyman, 7th Congressional District candidate, trying to unseat Russell Fry in one of, again, only 7 congressional districts in the state of South Carolina. And I'm going to take a quick break because I got to do that. But when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about like the size of your district and the difficulty it is to win a district of this size. And we'll expound on that when the Ron Show returns. All right, literally about 5 more minutes left of the Ron Show today. And I want to thank you for listening, whether it's on Progressive Voices via TuneIn on 11 p.m. to midnight. 5 to 6 p.m. we get the replay on America One Radio, and of course weekdays 9 to 10 a.m. first run, and then via podcast. And show notes are at ronshowatl.com. Mal Hyman, 7th congressional candidate for South Carolina's House seat, running against Russell Fry. Your district, if I remember correctly, is about as big as a New England state.
That's right. It's 8 counties all the way from Georgetown and Horry County up to Chesterfield, Marlborough, and Dillon. So it's huge, and some of the times I'm driving 2.5 hours to get to an event.
Right. You did break down and buy a hybrid Toyota, which I think is pretty cool because I think that speaks not only to what you needed to do, but also to your nod to dealing with the inevitability of climate change and what we need to do to address that.
Yeah, over 50 miles to the gallon. And, probably should have been subsidized to some extent by the government because we don't have the electrical grid to handle all the EVs nor the infrastructure yet. We'll get there, and we need to make greater investments in infrastructure, but it's been helpful for me.
I go on these rants every once in a while where I talk about the need for us to uncap the House. We're at 435. I believe it should be closer to 1,200. The nation's population has tripled since the last time we grew the House of Representatives. What kind of impact do you think that would make, not just on your race, because you would obviously be dealing with a smaller geography, but for the power of the voice of the voter as well?
Well, you're completely right. This would be a great change, as would a presidential election where those who win the popular vote become president. We've got a gerrymandering system that's unfair at the state level and wouldn't stand the light of day, and where those in power are picking their districts rather than those in the districts picking the representatives. And when you get a district that's gerrymandered heavily, it's really tough to win. Good people don't run, and it moves redder and redder when that's the case. Love to see the change on it. I really think town hall meetings, what the House of Representatives should be about. I'm on a listening tour. It's humbling. It's daunting, but absolutely critical. And what I think could be interesting to your viewers is the problems in rural areas are quite similar to problems in urban areas. Whether we're talking high crime, a minimum wage that's not adequate, that people don't have decent health care, education's not affordable, a fourth of our seniors can't afford prescription drugs, climate change hits everyone. To dovetail back to what we were talking about before with infrastructure and climate change, we don't have an infrastructure that's safe from cyber attack, nor can it bring solar and wind power from rural areas to urban areas. We need to make a huge investment. The local and state governments don't have the resources. It's a role for the federal government. I think the dialogue is different. If you have town hall meetings, smaller districts would do that. And it would make the presidential election a lot more fair also with this old electoral college system, which is a holdover from the time when slaves were 3/5 of a person.
And didn't get to vote, obviously, and women didn't either. You're running against a candidate who will not step on a debate stage with you. So when is your opportunity to actually be compared to Russell Fry side by side?
We're going to get one opportunity for 30 minutes of questioning separate from each other by the Post and Courier. And that's it. There have been other efforts by chambers of commerce, League of Women Voters to bring us together. There's no requirement. There could be. There should be.
Should be.
And you can lay out a narrative that someone's afraid to debate. We're seeing that at the national level. And it doesn't have much impact. You really need to bake it into the system, to require it some way so that folks who are going to vote get to see you face-to-face and responding to each other. Other than that, you do the best you can to get your message out, and you use every platform. Text messaging to vote builder lists has made it a lot easier for candidates that are scrappy and creative to get their message out, but it's still tough. I think you can be outspent 5-1 and still win, but there probably is an amount that you need to win in a congressional district. It's too big to knock on all the doors.
Yeah.
If you're running for the state house, you can knock on 5,000 doors and outwork your opponent and get known. You can't do that at the congressional level.
Absolutely. Mal Hyman running for Congress here in South Carolina's 7th Congressional District. All right, I'm getting the sign. You've got an event to go to. So
Great
let's
to
let
join you. Thanks,
Same
Ron.
here, and I'll see you later today. All right, show notes at ronshowatl.com. Back tomorrow 9 to 10 a.m. on America One Radio. 5 to 6 p.m. the replay, 11 p.m. to midnight at Progressive Voices via TuneIn, and of course wherever you podcast. Thank you for listening.